Meeting called to order for Tuesday, July 9th. Roll call, please.
Mr. Kohler?
Here.
Mr. Duncan? Mr. Moore?
Here.
Ms. Simmons?
Here.
Okay, thank you very much. Item A, consider approval. Check register from May 16th to June 15th, 2019, in the amount $13,435,512.85.
Mr. Toller, if you don't mind, I'd like to change the agenda just for review and discuss. There's no approval necessary on this item.
Okay,
I just caught it just when he read it. So, but really, it's just presented to the board for information
all right,
purposes.
no
only.
action needed. Any questions on that? Okay, item B, review
this is
year-to-date. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for information only, to review the year-to-date actual budget amount for our major funds. I presented the reports attached. We are projecting to have a reduction in our salaries and benefits to the tune of about $900,000. At the same time, we are anticipating similar type of increase in our risk management fund, mainly our workers' comp claims. But outside that, everything else on the general fund seems to be as budgeted and trending. And also on our maintenance fund and our capital project funds, we are budgeting the expenditures and revenues are as trended, as anticipated.
Okay, any questions on that, item B? Okay, item C, approval of proposed travel reimbursement for the new year.
Mr. Chairman, this is by policy, our travel reimbursement expenditures for employee-related company business travel is to mirror the state travel allowance, so we're asking the board to approve those rates to match the changes that the state approved for this upcoming school year.
Okay, do we hear a motion on that?
Make motion.
Motion made by Mr. Moore, seconded by,
Send.
Oh, you don't have anybody else?
nope,
I'll do it. Okay.
all right, seconded by Ms. Simmons. So just grateful and glad you could.
Well, this feels funny. I'm not on the committee, but okay.
All right, any questions on the travel reimbursement figures? Any objections? All right, hearing none, it's approved. Item D, approval of the renewal of student accident insurance policy for 2019 and 20.
Again, Mr. Chairman, this is that time of the year. Our student activity policy will be expiring the end of July. We're asking for the renewal of the policy. We do have Ms. Bro with us in the audience today to answer any particular questions, but we are asking to renew with the same existing policy, and it is at the same rate. There is a slight increase in the catastrophic coverage of $349. Outside of that, all the other coverages are pretty much the same. The only thing is that the voluntary student coverage available for parents, the school time coverage has gone down about $19. However, the 24-hour coverage for parents, if they choose, went up $34. Everything else has remained the same.
Okay, do we hear the form of a motion?
Make motion.
Motion made by Mr. Moore,
Second.
seconded by Ms. Simmons. Any questions?
Now, guys, Ms. Bro has come a long way for this meeting, and she's sitting in the audience.
sure
She'd
she'd
love
want to
to
answer a couple questions.
Ms. Bro, you have any comments?
I'll be happy to answer any questions that y'all may have, but I'm just asking for approval tonight to go ahead and renew these policies, and it's my recommendation that we renew as presented.
Any questions, comments? Any objections? No objection, motion carries. Thank you very much. Item E, salary schedule, 2019-2020.
Mr. Chairman, presented before y'all today is our 2019-2020 salary schedule. The salary schedules do include the $1,000 teacher's raise that has been included in the MFP and the $500 support employee raise that has also been included in the MFP. And it's presented, that's the only significant change in this salary schedule, and it's presented to y'all for approval.
Okay, we hear that in form of a motion?
Motion.
Motion
Second.
made by Mr. Moore,
Second.
seconded by Ms. Simmons. Any questions? All right, Ms. Rose?
I would just like to bring back up again, we had talked a few years ago, I know we were short on funds when we did, but it was for the CDL licensed employees, if they don't get a CDL, if they're like driving the bus for a track team or football team or whatever, then they get a little bit of extra money. I mean, they don't get money.
It's a portion of the, I'll help you out,
It's
Ms.
taken
Rosen.
away, yeah.
Yes.
In other words, if they don't get the CDL, they're deducted. But to me, no one really wants to get the CDL. I don't know why we're penalizing the people who are getting the CDLs or not getting, I mean, it's just convoluted, I think. We had worked out a plan that we could maybe change that wording to actually reward the people who were bothering to go to the school and do all the extra training and take the risk to get a CDL license rather than hurting people when they don't want to do it. I mean, I don't understand that. So I would like for us to maybe take a visit back at that again. I mean, I'm for approving this, but I would like to see if we can do some maneuvering on that because it's really not fair. No one wants to drive those buses, you know.
Ms. Rose, Mr. Mingus, it's a part of the coach's salary stipend, and it reads, any high school or junior high school coach not possessing a CDL license and who is not available to drive the school activity bus will receive a 1% deduction in their salary stipend. So for those coaches who do not go through the effort of pursuing the CDL license and maintaining that license, they actually get a reduction for the particular stipend that they're asking for. Because
But it
they're not
seems like
available
we
to
would
drive.
try to reward people, and we may get a few more people who actually would do this.
But that's a reduction of the stipend,
Yes.
not a reduction of, they're not losing money, they're just not getting as much as they could get.
That's correct.
What if they're driving the bus for, say if they're an assistant for basketball, and they're driving the bus for the basketball team, they don't really get paid extra or anything. But if that same driver is employed as an assistant for the basketball team but goes to drive the football team because they're not getting the stipend, then those people who have done it actually get paid as a field trip bus driver. So more of them are choosing not to get the CDL if they're going to do the track or they're going to do football. I'm just thinking it would be a way to reward and maybe encourage people to actually go through the training to get a CDL, and we would have a bigger pool to choose from. Now, I know last year, we had a hard time even replacing some bus drivers when some of the teams went to, like, playoffs. And so some of the regular bus drivers that drive the regular route were driving the kids to Alexandria or wherever they had to go for their playoff game, but it left the bus route short because we didn't have any CDL people handy to get on the field trip bus. Am I correct?
That's correct.
So if we had more CDL coaches, they could take the field trip to Alexandria or whatever they needed to do, and the bus driver could actually stay on the bus route that day. I just think it would be a way to encourage people to maybe go ahead and get the CDL that actually do coach sports, and they can actually fill in when we need them. I'm just, instead of deducting money from them if they don't do it. It just seems.
Mr. Mingus, are you making a motion to change
I
it?
would love to make a motion to change the wording to not penalize people when they get a CDL, when they don't get the CDL, but rather reward them if they do. You need a second?
Mr. Chairman?
Hold up, we have a motion on the floor right now.
Make it a little clearer.
You would have to get the wording correct to address the, not deduct them, but
So
reward.
Mr. Mingus, as I'm hearing you, you would like the policy to read that instead of deducting 1%, you would like to add 1% if they get their CDL license? Mr. Jenko, you're okay with that? Mr. Chairman?
My question is, has that stipend already been figured into the salary?
It's currently in
What you're
the
saying
the
is
deduction
that
is currently
if
built in,
They don't
but-
do with that stipend.
right. But Mr. Moore, I can't imagine it being a significant cost.
Right.
The stipends for this coming year.
Which is the reason why I'm asking the question, because
Yes.
it's not significant, you know.
I don't think it's a material cost item for us. If the board feels that a reward would be more advantageous, then I would be open to that, if Ms. Silly's okay
May-
with that.
Absolutely.
May encourage someone to go ahead and get their CDL at one of our classes that are, we're providing. And I mean, it could only help us if we have extra CDL coaches on campus in the case that we need someone to drive a group of kids to a playoff game or something.
So what I'm hearing is, right now, we have a motion to approve the new salary schedule, and you have an amendment. You want to amend that motion with a substitute motion, basically. You want to do a substitute motion to change the wording of that to increase by 1% on the stipend if they have a CDL license.
Yes.
Is there any way you could put that into words?
Well, I have a substitute motion to approve changing the wording to add 1% to a stipend to employees who require a CDL.
Correct.
Should it be
For,
So do-
under the coach's stipend.
Do we? so do we
Coach's
table the
salary
motion?
stipend,
No.
page
No.
14.
Or do we?
Just be a substitute.
We're just substituting.
So I need a second for the substitute. We have a
Second.
second with Ms. Simmons? Rose, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm not on the committee, yeah.
Mr. Moore made the substitute motion, right?
Yes.
Yes, that's what I thought. Ms. Simmons seconded the substitute motion.
Okay.
Any-
Mr. Jinko brought up something that is concerning. What happens the individual coach who is driving for the sport chooses not to drive the trip?
What do you mean, the field trip?
They're qualified to drive, but they choose not to drive the trip that they're coaching for. Say I'm a football coach, I have my CDL license, and I'm not driving one of the buses for the football team to go to the game.
I don't, go
We
ahead.
pretty much made that a requirement that the coaches get,
It's
they get their CDLs and that they.
It's not a requirement. They do not have to get it, but they, currently under today's salary schedule, they would be deducted 1% of their coach's stipend
If
for
they
not
didn't.
having that CDL and not driving.
Well,
Like the table.
they would be deducted the 1% if they didn't have their CDL, but they would still get it if they had their CDL, even if they didn't drive under
We've been trying to
the
get,
current. So we're not changing anything on that.
You're right,
So
correct.
that's, nothing's changing other than we're rewarding a CDL driver instead of,
I figured.
so, as it stands, substitute motion is accurate. Motion and second on the floor. Any questions, comments, concerns? Any objections? Substitute motion carries, which nullifies the original motion.
Thank you.
Okay.
He'll work it out.
Item F, consider approval of the contract with CSRS Incorporated to develop a 5-year facilities plan focused on addressing district growth and use of portable modular classroom buildings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I happen to have Mr. Pellerin and Mr. Rutledge with us today, and I think they have a brief presentation.
Correct.
Would you like to entertain a motion first?
Yeah, let's get this in form of motions. We have it on the floor.
Okay, I'll make the motion.
Mr. Moore, seconded by Ms.
Second.
Simmons. Okay. Mr. Rutledge, how are you doing?
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Schneidelbach, Chairman Toller, board members, Superintendent Stelly. I want to emphasize we have a very brief presentation tonight that sort of captures.
Could you talk in the mic?
Yeah, can you
I'm
speak
sorry.
louder?
Thank you. Yeah.
We have a very brief presentation that sort of captures the essence of the proposal that was presented to you, or submitted rather, from about a 40,000 foot level. And at the conclusion of the presentation, we'll be happy to entertain any questions should there be any. Is everybody hearing me okay?
Yes.
Okay, all right. The primary components of the proposal will focus on the demographic study, the scope of the facility planning, the proposal, optional services, and the schedule that we are proposing. I'm joined tonight by Mr. Christopher Pellegrin, who is a principal in our firm and serves as Executive Vice President for Growth and Strategy. We're very proud of our firm's 40-year history. We have locations in Baton Rouge, New Orleans, Lake Charles, Dallas. We employ some 135 professionals, and we work in the non-exclusive areas of master planning, program management, owner representation, architecture, civil engineering, resiliency, and disaster recovery. Whatever plan is ultimately approved by the board is going to be largely informed by a demographic study. We recommend, and I believe it's the next item up for your consideration, the firm of Geographic Planning and Demographic Services. I personally, it's headed by Mr. Mike Hefner, who's a former school board member in Lafayette Parish. I have personal, as well as Mr. Pellegrin and our firm, experience with him. He does excellent work, very responsive, very knowledgeable, and he gets it from a K-12 perspective, particularly having served on the Lafayette Parish School Board. The development of a facilities improvement plan really consists of about 4 key steps. First, obviously, is the prioritization of the need. Secondly, the development of the plan. Thirdly, a very slightly important aspect of it is secure funding for it, and the implementation of the plan. The components of the plan obviously are a prioritized project list, a master budget, master schedule, as well as the quality standards that will guide the implementation of the overall plan. At this point, I want to turn it over to Mr. Pellegrin to ask him to come and talk about the planning scope and the details associated with that.
Thank you, Mr. Rutledge. I'm gonna put this back and hope that y'all can hear me okay. So the planning effort is focused on 2 main aspects of the needs that the district has. The first is to reduce, would love to eliminate, but I don't think that's going to be something that we can do, but reduce significantly the reliance on the portable/temporary buildings that are spread throughout the district, and replace those where capacity is needed with permanent classroom space and other spaces needed. And the second is to accommodate the growth. The growth is occurring in certain areas, and so there's a need to increase the permanent classroom space. So we'll be looking at every campus where we're trying to replace portable and temporary buildings, and then where we need to accommodate growth with permanent buildings. We're going to look 5 years out to coincide with the demographic study that Mr. Hefner is going to put together for you. And again, we'll address every facility across the district where the needs are. And the phasing that we're going to look at is going to be dependent on the funding. So y'all will be able to guide us in terms of what funding might be available when, and we can then adjust the phasing of the implementation of this plan accordingly. In terms of our proposal, again, you heard Mr. Rutledge talk about the demographic study. That's a contract directly with Mr. Hefner's firm, Geographic and Demographic Services, LLC. The facility planning will be with CSRS, and we've actually submitted a form of contract for review by your council and Mr. Schnadelbach for the services. Mr. Rutledge mentioned some optional services, some things that are in the proposal that y'all have in front of you. There's some components of this that y'all might want to look at down the road as we get into this, and one of them is the community engagement. You know, if you're going to be seeking voter approval for anything, you're going to want to engage the community as soon as possible. Also helping you leverage funding, multiple funding sources, exploring what alternatives you have in order to accomplish the goals that are established in the plan itself. And then any submittals that we can help you with in terms of facilities related to your compliance with the desegregation order and your ultimate goal of unitary status there. So all of those things are available to you. We're happy to help you with all of those services. In terms of schedule, we're ready to begin as soon as you are. We have a team ready to go. The demographics is the critical path. I have talked to Mr. Hefner. He's also ready to go immediately, and should have preliminary numbers in about 60 days or so. And he always likes to reinforce those with the actual October counts when you get those published. And so the final numbers will be later in the fall. Of course, the planning work can go simultaneously with that. There's a lot of work that we can do ahead of having those numbers, but it's going to take about 4 to 6 months, depending on, when we elect to be finished and where we want to go from there. But it'll take some time to get all of the data put together for the plan. So with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Any questions? Ms. Simmons?
So the portable modular classroom buildings, so what's the definition of that? How do you describe those?
So it is.
Made out of what?
It's made out of, it's a building that's not a permanent building. And that's hard to say because some of those buildings have probably been in place for decades, and that you would say is a permanent building. But it is a building that was constructed to be temporary, and it's probably up on blocks. It's probably got ramps up to it. It's wood construction. Rolled on the campus. In some cases, you're leasing them. In some cases, you own them.
So
But
pretty
it-
much you just covered a prefab building?
Yes, sir.
So it's not the same thing, Brett, as those permanent-looking buildings at Larange?
It would include those modular buildings built in Larange during our new student assignment plan, yes.
So it would include that?
Essentially, the plan that we hope to get would include the elimination of those modular
Okay.
buildings.
Yeah. Okay, I got a better picture. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay, so the modular buildings are the primary target for this?
Their studies can also include the growth. They're going to do the demographic study. We're going to get a 5-year projection of enrollment for every school on our campus.
So
And with
that's
that,
the
we'll
same
be able to look at those enrollment numbers, compare them to our capacity, our
Same.
current capacity, both permanent and modular capacity, and determine what school campuses have the greatest need. And it'll be our hope that CRS will help us prioritize those needs and develop a 5-year plan so we can fund those needs.
And just as a public statement, correct me if I'm wrong, this is something that is very critical in us getting unitary status, something that the court has asked us to do, something that Mr. Snoddelbach and his office has been working with Mr. Rutledge and them trying to, the price has been from one extreme to the other and trying to figure out what we can do and what they can do. And our goal in this entire process has been to get what the court would like us to get, the information, so we can use it. But I appreciate the work that y'all have done to try to narrow this scope down to where it's something we can afford and something we can do. So have a motion and a second on the floor. Any other questions?
I was just going to kind of say what you said. I know our staff is picking up a lot of the detail that we really didn't want to have to afford to pay for you guys. And I really want to thank those people, and because there's a lot that's going to go into it that's going to be done by our employees. I really appreciate that and all your work that you've done to narrow this money down. Appreciate
Thank you,
it.
Mr. Mingus.
Okay. Any objection? Hearing no objection, motion carries.
Did you have a motion?
Yes.
Who made it?
Mr. Moore?
Who seconded
And you did? A long time ago,
Oh, way back. Okay, it's been a while.
before they even spoke.
Okay, all right. That's true.
Bless your heart. Okay, item G, approval for a contract with Geographic Planning and Demographic Services to develop a 5-year population projection for each school, which
Okay,
is
Mr.
what we
Chairman,
just
this
heard.
is tied into the presentation that CSRS has just made. This will be the individual contractor who will do the demographer work related with that study.
Hear that in form of a motion?
Make the motion?
Motion by Mr.
Second.
Moore, seconded by Ms. Simmons. Any questions? Any objections? Motion carries.
Thank
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman.
Item H, consider approval to loan $5,000 to Larange High School to purchase a used school bus to be used for extracurricular activities.
Mr. Chairman, the Larange High School Administration has asked to borrow $5,000 so they can couple it with some funds they have on hand to buy a used school bus. The school bus was part of equipment that was reviewed in our last bus purchase group, so it meets the qualification to be purchased. They would like to make this purchase and borrow the money to do it. They will repay the central office back based on the existing rate that we earn on our checking account, which is right now close to 3%.
A question before the motion. Okay, I need to ask a question.
Question before the motion.
Yeah. All right, so why do we have to pay for it?
Their funds in their bus activity fund is a little shy, and they would like to borrow the money and would be using the buses next school year to take activity-related trips in which they would be reimbursed for those trips through the transportation allotment, and it would allow them to pay the funds back.
I mean, normally, do schools have to pay the money back when they use the buses?
Well, they're looking to purchase the bus. They're not looking to use a contract driver's bus or to use one of the board-owned buses. They would like to purchase the bus, and in doing so, they would own the bus and they would maintain the bus. And then when they use the bus for a co-curricular activity, the central office allots money to the schools for that purpose. They get reimbursed or paid on a per mileage basis. The school would generate that revenue to repay the loan and thus would have an extra bus to allow them to use. Part of the time is when board-owned buses are being used on routes and they need to take a trip, an early trip like a baseball game or a basketball game where they need to leave before the buses are finished their routes, there's a conflict in having buses available for the school. So
Okay,
it's to the advantage of the school to have a couple activity buses available.
The question is, though, normally schools do pay for their own buses like that.
Well,
in
we have
those
bought some
situations.
for the schools in the past, and some schools have purchased their own.
Okay,
Let's get a motion and a second on the floor.
I'll make the motion then.
Motion made by Ms. Simmons, second by Mr. Moore. Yeah, the question I had on that is, other schools that have their buses, at the school, like this bus, if a contract driver's bus is broken down and needs to use this bus, will the school be reimbursed for the use of that?
The school would be able to charge the contract driver for the bus at $40 per day.
Okay.
That's a policy.
So the school could make that money back and use that money to help pay for the bus back.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it's also important to note that Laranja High School was the only school that did not get a bus when we bought new buses back in the early 2000s. If you remember, Sumner High and Kentwood High got the first two flat-nose buses, I think, in 2000 or 2001. Ponchatoula High, Hammond High got two buses the following year, and then Independence and Amite got two buses the next year. And then at that point, we started running into some financial difficulty, and Laranja High never got a bus. So they are actually one less bus than the other schools.
So if they never got a bus, maybe we owe them one.
They're asking for a loan, Ms. Simmons.
I have a comment.
Ms. Rose?
Well, I know Ponchatoula High bought same thing, they bought a bus. But the bus actually belongs to the school system, right?
The bus
I mean, the bus is still
yes.
tagged as a school
It's
system
going to be
bus.
tagged as a school board-owned bus, and it will be registered to the school system, and I will hold the title to the bus.
That's what because that's what happened with,
And that will be the same
that's
with
what
this
happened at
particular bus,
Ponchatoula.
even though Laranja will have to repay the loan.
So is there a timeline on the repayment of the loan?
I'm hoping 12 months. I haven't really established that
Okay,
yet.
all right.
Yeah,
Let's just approve this.
okay. All right, did we make the motion?
Well, we have a motion and
I
a
did the
second on the
motion,
floor.
second.
Okay, any other questions? Any objections? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman.
sir. Any other items of business to be brought before Finance Committee? Hearing none, meeting is adjourned.
All right, say that again.